We are talking Stanley Cup playoffs, Kings versus Oilers, with longtime Kings broadcaster Jim Fox on this edition of Locked On LA Kings.
You are Locked On Kings, your daily podcast on the Los Angeles Kings, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hey, Kings fans, welcome to Locked On LA Kings, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Thanks for making Locked On LA Kings your first listen every day. We are free and available wherever you get your podcasts and on YouTube. I'm Eddie Garcia, your host of Locked On LA Kings. I've worked in sports media for the past 30 years, also one of the co-hosts of Locked On NHL Game Night, a nightly NHL recap show, and a passionate LA Kings fan for over 30 years. Today's episode is brought to you by Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use the code LOCKEDONNHL for $20 off your first purchase. The NHL regular season is over. We are getting ready for the start of the Stanley Cup playoffs. It is the LA Kings against the Edmonton Oilers for a fourth straight year. Game one coming up on Monday in Los Angeles, and joining us to discuss the matchup once again is former Kings player and longtime Kings TV broadcaster for 35 years, the great Jim Fox. Jim, thanks for doing this. How you doing?
Eddie, doing fine. Thank you very much for having me again. Kings made the playoffs, home ice advantage, so we're doing okay.
Yeah. Before we get into the specifics of the matchup this time around, I am curious about, I'm probably asked you this before, but the format, 4 years in a row, Kings Oilers, it's certainly something that we haven't seen in the Stanley Cup playoffs since I think the mid 80s when Montreal and Boston met 4 years in a row. So it's not something that's a common occurrence, but it is still 4 years in a row. I think it has its pluses and its minuses. How do you feel about it?
Yeah, I know the topic comes up for discussion quite a bit at this time of year. Eddie, I'll just take it from this perspective. If they do change the format 10 years from now, we'll be talking about changing it back because that's what seems to happen. You kind of get used to something, it works. The reason they went to the current format was to try to increase rivalries. So you get that because you get multiple series in a row, seasons in a row. But yeah, sometimes, the point balance is out of whack a little bit, and certain teams maybe should not be in a first round matchup because you're getting top teams beat out in the first round. But I'm going to stick with my first comment. I know when they made the change, why they made the change. And if they do change it back, then I think you're going to be in a situation where 1 through 8, I guess, in each conference, 10 years after that, they'll be trying to change it back to what we have right now.
Well, you mentioned the word rivalry, and obviously you do get that when you meet a team 4 years in a row. But this isn't just about 4 years in a row. I mean, Kings Oilers was certainly something in the mid 80s to early 90s, which all too well about being a part of those meetings. So when you think overall Kings Oilers, what kind of comes to mind for you?
Well, it does come to mind, and I'm not going to try to downplay any of the Kings players that we had because it reversed a couple of times. The Robitailles and the Jans and the Taylors and the Simmers and all the top players. But it just seems like every time you're playing the Oilers, they have the best player in the league. It was Gretzky back then when we played him in the early 80s. And, of course, now it's Draisaitl or McDavid where you take your pick. So, again, I don't want to downplay the star value of some of the Kings teams that we had playing against the Oilers. But at the same time, it does seem to be if the Kings win, it's more of a balance issue. If the Oilers win, it's more of their stars issue.
Yeah, well, we'll get into that. Maybe it's the same thing again this time around. But I talk to Kings friends and fans, and the one thing I keep hearing, and it's guarded optimism, but it feels different for a number of reasons. I guess number one would be the obvious, the home ice advantage. The one thing that is definitely different from the 3 previous meetings. And I know the Stanley Cup playoffs, home ice isn't always the advantage that you might think it would be. However, in this particular series, do you think it is a advantage for the LA Kings?
I put it this way before, Eddie, and I'm going from a complete team identity format. The Kings are a team that excel because they do well without the puck. And when you're playing without the puck and that's your strength, how the Kings disrupt the other team's offense, they suppress chances, they suppress shots. It's without the puck. You need more energy to play that type of style. When you have the puck, you don't need energy. When you have the puck, it's fun. You're going, so that's why I think the Kings' energy at home, the fans and every team gets that, right? Every team, when they're at home, they get a boost from the home fans and the energy that those fans bring. But I think with the Kings, it's more important because they need that energy more than other teams because their strength is without the puck. So I give a lot of credit to the Kings team for sticking with this identity. I give a lot of credit to the Kings fans for feeling that as the season went along and understanding that the Kings play very well defensively, and they're hounding other teams and they're on them and they're disrupting plays. They're never making it clean for the opposition. And a lot of that sometimes, Eddie, when it comes down to that, it comes down to legs and energy. Do you have that energy to play that style that isn't necessarily going to show up in the stat sheet? And the Kings have done that this year, and the Kings fans have been right behind them.
Another difference when you look at these two teams appears to be in net, with Darcy Kemper being amazing all year long for Edmonton. It looks like Stuart Skinner will get the start in the series, but he did come off an injury not too long ago. He's been a bit up and down, but we've seen him before. But for the Kings' fourth straight meeting and fourth different starting goalie, and all due respect to those other guys, it does seem like this time around the Kings have a big advantage in net. Would you agree with that?
I think Eddie, and you used the word already, optimism. I think there's a lot of reasons to be optimistic this year. I think in previous years, it's more cautious. You're going in, you understand what's on the other side. Preface everything that we're going to talk about today. When you have Draisaitl and McDavid, they can win the series all by themselves. I think we talked about that last year. It's just that's the one thing they have that other teams don't. Having said that, the reason to be optimistic, yes, the Kings style, the defensive structure, and then you have the acquisition through trade of Darcy Kemper. And if you take a look at his numbers, I mean, you break down his numbers, they're right up there with the top goalies in the league. So that's part of a team thing, but that's also part of Darcy coming in. And the one thing, you're a locked on here. Well, he's locked on. He has so much confidence in his defenders, his defensemen, the forwards, to take care of the open man or the man that doesn't have the puck, the players away from the puck. He's so confident that's going to be taken care of. He can lock on the shooter, and he can be square to that shooter. And he's big. He's long legs, long arms. So he's got that reach factor, and he provides a huge presence in net. And I think that is one of, if not the top reason for the Kings to be optimistic.
I know on a recent broadcast, you and Nick Nixon had given your picks for some of the awards in the NHL, and you picked Darcy Kemper for the Vezina.
Oh, yeah, Eddie, I'll preface that with this.
Okay.
If you go back and look at it, you'll see me say, we all know who's going to win it.
Right.
So, you're doing those types. And I think Darcy's right up there. I think his numbers are right there with Hellebuck.
Well, the thing I wanted to ask you about was there was a recent a post put out by the NHL. It got a lot of attention from the Kings fans. They talked about finalists for the Vezina, and they didn't even mention Darcy Kemper. He certainly, look, I know he missed some games this year, and I know he's on the West Coast, but it would be hard for me to believe he's not in the finalist for the Vezina.
I think it's games played. I think that's what hurts him because of those injuries early on. He had a couple of stints on the IR, so that hurts him. Total wins type of thing, because you don't play those amount of games, you don't get up into those categories. The Vezina is selected by the general managers. So that's something that's a little bit different. These guys are not just looking at stats. These guys know these players. They know the value of that player to the team, the goaltender, what he does. So I think when you're talking about media, I agree with you 100%. I was listening to a talk show today again where not even mentioned. Not even mentioned. I mean, his numbers by themselves should at least get him a mention. I don't want to downplay my selection. Again, a lot of those times, you don't want to pick the same as the other guy. And Nick ended up, we picked a couple of the same. You want to get the conversation going out there.
Right.
But yeah, I did. Who's going to win? Hellebuck's going to win.
Yeah.
That's going to be the case. But you always have some opinions there. My purpose for that selection, I think, was a purpose that, if you take a look at the numbers, they are going to show that he is one of the top goaltenders in the league. Yeah,
I agree with you. I think Connor Hellebuck will win it, but it would be appropriate, I think, for Darcy to be mentioned in the conversation a little bit more
because the GM selected. I think he has a better chance there than he does. And no disrespect there, we don't get a chance, right, to at least the Eastern Conference. I don't get a chance to watch a lot of their games. We don't get a chance to play those teams a lot. So at the end of the year, a lot of times when you're selecting, your candidate for an award, you're looking at stats only. And okay, if you're doing that, okay, pick target. But again, when they look through the wins column, just not there. I was hurt a couple of times, didn't play enough games to get to that point there. GMs might have a different thought process.
All right, we'll continue to look at this Kings-Oilers matchup, part 4, with Jim Fox here on Locked On LA Kings, your team every day. Did you know your Fire TV is also an Xbox? Turn any TV into your gaming and entertainment hub with Fire TV Stick 4K devices. No console required. Just grab your paired controller, subscribe or sign in to Xbox Game Pass Ultimate with EA Play included, and you're ready to play. Dive into hundreds of premium titles from EA Sports College Football 25 to Call of Duty Black Ops 6 and Avowed, as easy as you stream your favorite shows. It's gaming made simple, and it's all on your Fire TV. With 4K streaming, watch more than 1.5 million movies and TV episodes from your favorite subscribed services like Netflix, Prime Video, Disney Plus, Max, and more. Head to Amazon.com/Fire TV Locked On to get started. Xbox Game Pass Ultimate subscription and comparable controller required. Available on select devices, including Fire TV Stick 4K 2nd Gen, Fire TV Stick 4K Max 1st and 2nd Gen, and Fire TV Cube 3rd Gen. We are continuing with former Kings player Jim Fox, played parts of 9 seasons with the Kings, 3-time 30-goal scorer. Jim's special teams likely to be very important in this series. Is it for the Kings stay out of the box? Is it getting a few more power play goals, which they didn't get any last year? Or is it having a strong penalty kill? Or is it kind of a mix of all the above?
I think it's two things. I think it's continuing what they did at the end of the regular season on the power play. Again, because they were so far behind, they're not going to affect the ranking. They're still going to be near the bottom there, 28th, somewhere around. That's what they're going to be. But their percentage since the trade deadline, since the acquisition of Andrei Kuzmenko, that's made a huge difference. And their chances that they're creating, the scoring that they're getting on the power play, that just carry that over a little bit. It doesn't have to be the same, but be dangerous on the power play. And then to me, it's the adjustments made during the series on the penalty kill. That's the one the Kings could not figure out last year. They just could not figure out how to stop the Edmonton power play. I think, yes, discipline is always important, but Edmonton will get power plays because they're as good as anyone at getting to the high danger area. So you get to the high danger area, you're going to draw attention, you're going to have calls. That's what's going to happen. So they're going to go on the power play, but it's up to the Kings to do what they did during the regular season. But if there's a wrinkle thrown at them from the Edmonton Oilers, then they've got to find a way to adjust to that. And last year they did not do that.
Maybe a wrinkle for the Kings, and I know Drew Doughty was resting later in the year, but they went to 5 forwards on the number 1 power play unit. Quinton Biffield was in kind of for Drew Doughty. Is using 5 forwards in a playoff setting like this, is that something that they might do, or you think that might be a little too risky to use in the playoffs?
I think there will be times, if you're behind a goal and, the next one, you're down in the last 5 minutes and the next one's so important, you might go to that. It's certainly the guy that helps there is Adrian Kempe, because he's proven before he can kind of play almost like a defenseman, but you can't guarantee he would be the guy back because he might be in an attack position on the power play that when the turnover happens, he's not the guy that's facing the attack by the Oilers. So it's something obviously the opposition team would exploit once they get the puck. It would change their mindset. A lot of times it's get the puck, just clear. Well, when you have 5 forwards, it's get the puck, and maybe if there's an opportunity, you have a counterattack and you go at it that way. But I think we'll see it at times. I think there are times, and it's just part, Eddie, of a bigger picture that we've been talking about for 3 years, and it's a reason for my optimism this year compared to other years. In the past, it was worry about the Oilers. Oilers never had to worry about the Kings. Well, maybe with 5 forwards on a power play, maybe it changes the look. Maybe they're going to have to start worrying about the Kings are attacking them. And the Kings could not flip that switch in the previous 3 years. It was all about the Oilers, and now it has to be a little bit about the Kings. When the Kings get it, and at the end of the year, Eddie, the Kings were outstanding in transition counterattack offense and generating chances that way. That's part of the system change they made from a year ago. But I just think, Kuzmenko again joining, giving a little bit more life to the top line. It seems like you're going back a month now. the top three lines for the Kings, and then you say the fourth line. There was more of an identity within all three or four of those lines that they didn't have earlier in the year. And I think that's something maybe the other team's going to have to worry about the Kings a little bit.
We talked about Darcy Kemper. It seems that Quinton Biffield will be a very important player in this series, matched up perhaps against Connor McDavid with his speed, his wingspan, things like that. Look, no one's going to stop Connor McDavid, but you try to make it as difficult on him as possible. But he's obviously still a very young player. How important is Quinton Biffield offensively and defensively in this series, you think?
I'm going to look at it, first of all, from the point you brought up. He is one of the few players in the entire league at his size that has the foot speed to keep up with and move with Connor McDavid. So that's a plus for Byfield compared to a lot of players in the league. The second thing is, again, can he counterattack? Again, flip that switch again. Do the Oilers or will the Oilers have to worry about him offensively? And I think that's something that he's become more consistent at this year. He's improved on faceoffs. He's improved his shot. A lot of different ways there. So when the Kings get the counter again, will Byfield be there? I think that's one of the biggest wild cards in the series, Eddie, is this. I think Quinton will be tested in this series. I think the Oilers will go after him. I think Adrian Kempe went through it 3 years ago, and he came through a shining – he just came through it, playing the hardest hockey of his life in the playoffs. I think Quinton will be tested this year exactly the same way, and that means every single shift. Again, if he's out there against McDavid, maybe not as much, but when the Oilers get a chance, they're going to go after him, and it's how he accepts that factor and how he gets through that factor.
Obviously, it might be interesting as well with that incident that he had with Darnell Nurse late in the season. If that maybe sparks him a little bit, we'll see. That certainly was a potentially dangerous situation. Thank goodness he's fine and ready to go. Yeah. But it'd be interesting to see how he maybe responds to that kind of a challenge a little bit.
I think he will be challenged more exactly like that. Now, that one there was interesting. If you look back at the tape, and he picked up a one-game suspension. If Nurse had hit Byfield with the first cross-check attempt, it would have been way worse because there's more force behind that one than the one when he's lying on the ice. The one thing that would work in Nurse's favor there is that the play was still going on. The whistle hadn't gone yet. The thing that made the contact with Nurse was the whistle blew. It's after the whistle, which no longer makes it a hockey play, which makes you guess what his intent was. Well, his intent's no longer defending. His intent is to injure. So that's why he picked up the suspension. But if you would have hit him with a first cross check, then you get into that. I think that they're going to try to do that against as much as they can. And that's why, again, if the Kings can get the Oilers 40% of the game to worry about the Kings, that's going to be a huge difference this year. Another guy who has really changed, Eddie, and if you go back to the beginning of the year, and I don't want to bring it up this way, but I'm going to, I said, this is the year that Kevin Fiala has to get it. Getting it meaning playing hockey, winning hockey. And it wasn't a selfish thing. It was just understanding the risk and how much risk he was putting into his game onto the rest of the team and how that affected them. And he figured it out this year. And there was a lot of heart-to-hearts. Jim Hiller talked about it openly and publicly. Kevin Fiala talked about it publicly, where he said, we sat down and we went at it but then they came to an understanding. And the last 45 to 50 games, the best hockey Kevin Fiala has played for the Kings. When he was playing the other risky style, undisciplined penalty style, it was one of those where I was saying, you can't win without Kevin Fiala, but you can't win either the way he was playing. He has changed the way he's playing. And if that continues in the playoffs, that's another reason to be optimistic.
We know that likely the two most talented players on the ice will be wearing Oilers sweaters in Connor McDavid and Leon Draisaitl. However, this is a team game, and two players as great as they are can't do it by themselves. When you look at the depth scoring in this series, is that also another factor that seems to favor the Kings?
It does. It does. And Eddie, I'm just starting to get ready for my prep for the playoffs and the series. And the way I'm approaching things now is this. I'm obviously concerned about the Oilers, and I'm looking at their strengths and weaknesses, but I'm putting that aside. I am thinking about the Kings. Where are they different? And they are different now, exactly where you're talking. They have more balance. They have 3 lines that can get you. They really can. I mean, they've proven with the Dano line and the tenacious, the way they go at it. Then you have Byfield and Fiala, Laferriere providing the safety valve. Those other 2 guys. Then you've got Kuzmenko. Man, has he rejuvenated Andrei Kopitar. On that line is Kempe, who does it anyway. So now you have 3 lines. And I don't think we're saying anything that is surprising to anyone, but I think most people out there, I've read some of the reviews already, the previews, I should say, where, balance and depth up front favors the Kings. And it is a reason to be optimistic. You still have to respect the Oilers, and I do, and we all do, and the Kings do. But you have to. They went to the 7th game of the Stanley Cup final last year. They've changed. We've changed. Well, now that optimism has to come to the front because the Kings, I think, have made some positive changes. And I'm going to make the assumption it's going to be more difficult this year for the Oilers to handle those things than it was in the past.
All right, we've got a little bit more with Jim Fox. Continuing to talk with the Oilers versus Kings. We'll do that more next here on Locked On LA Kings, your team every day. There is nothing like the energy of a live game, whether it's catching a last-minute NHL showdown or soaking in the excitement of an NBA matchup. But finding great seats at a great price, that used to be a challenge until I found Gametime. Gametime makes scoring last-minute tickets easier than ever. Prices actually drop as the event gets closer, and with their all-in pricing, you can see the total up front. There are no surprises at checkout. Save up to 60% off buying last minute for sports, concerts, comedy, and theater events. And with these seat views before you buy, no surprise fees, and a lowest price guarantee, you can book with total confidence. Their lowest price guarantee means that I never worry about overpaying. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use the code LOCKEDONNHL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, that's the code LOCKEDONNHL for $20 off. Download Gametime today. Last minute tickets, lowest price, guaranteed. Wrapping it up with Kings longtime broadcaster Jim Fox. And Jim, in broadcasting, we always like to look for storylines. I think one of them is certainly that is interesting going into this is Warren Fogle, formerly of the Oilers, now with the LA Kings. You also have Victor Arvidsson doing kind of the same thing as well, leaving the Kings, going to the Oilers. I know Warren Fogle was voted as the top newcomer this season for the Kings. How important is he, do you think, in this series?
Well, he provides some of that balance we were just talking about. He gets to the front of the net. I don't know what he ended up with. I don't have it in front of me, 22 or 23 goals. And I believe only one of those goals was not in a high danger area. So he gets his body, his frame to the front or the net, the rebounds, the tips, wraparounds. So again, he is drawing attention. He's making the other team worry about him or this team, the Kings, in a high danger area. So I think that brings a lot. He is also a big fixture on the Kings penalty kill. His understanding of how to take the proper angles, use his legs to get him there, but also approach the situation from the proper angle. I think that's been a huge key for the Kings this year, and that's something they didn't have as far as the depth before. Now Fogle brings a little bit of that depth.
Yeah, and along those lines, I know it's easy for people to look at it and say it's Kings Oilers again, the same 2 teams, but it really isn't the same 2 teams. It's for LA, they've added a lot of different players. Certainly Darcy Kemper front and center. You mentioned Andrei Kuzmenko. We just mentioned Warren Fogle, Joel Edmondson now, depth on the defense. And then you even throw in some of the fourth line guys like Kalinius and Turcotte. It's not exactly the same team that the Kings are rolling out there this year.
No, it's not. It's completely different. I think, again, they went from a different system. Their systems now is still conservative. There's no question about that. They excel at suppressing chances against. That's what they do. They're great at that. But it does put them in a better position to counterattack. So systematically, they're different. Personnel, I mean, we can, and I'm sure we all do, we can go back and look at previous trades and 5 years ago and 4 and 3 and 2 and last, all that. But the acquisitions made in the offseason via trade or free agent signing or at the trade deadline, I don't think there's many that have hit 5 for 5 like Rob Blake did. Yep. So he went out and did that. Now again, I'm talking about those additions. Kemper, solid, most consistent player this year. Edmondson, part of that shot suppression, part of that penalty kill. size on the blue line, reach, disrupt. You have it that way. Fogle comes in. Again, the speed. We just talked about the penalty kill, ability to get to front of the net. Tanner Jeannot, who's injured right now, brought that element that the Kings replaced with Malott coming aboard because they felt they just needed to fix, that piece of the puzzle. All those things that we've gone through, the acquisitions, Kuzmenko. I mean, he's another wild card though, Eddie. He's bounced around. He hasn't been in the league that long, and he's 14 now. So playoffs are the time where the game changes a little bit. It's not as easy. Is he going to be able to find those areas? And if he can't, does he start becoming risky and trying to take So he's a wild card too. But if he continues to do what he did and bring, again, the Kings had a hole that they needed to fill. And that hole was a right-handed power play guy. And they got it in Kuzmenko. The way he played in the regular season, they got more than that. But they filled the hole they needed to fill, and you go from there. So all of these acquisitions we're talking about, that what make the Kings different. And to me, certainly more optimistic this year.
We know playoff success, progress is something that's been talked about. It's not just the fans. It's Rob Blake. It's Luc Robitaille. We know that that's there. And that'll ultimately decide whether this season has been successful or not. But every season, as you know, calling so many of them, is a unique journey, and you never know exactly how it's going to go. The Kings at home this year, more home wins than any Kings team in franchise history. They tied for the most wins and points ever for a Kings team. Looking back on this season, and we know what we like to see going forward, but it's been a heck of a season for the LA Kings.
It has been. And there's another guy that doesn't get a lot of attention. I think that's Jim Hiller. So he comes in his first year as full-time head coach. Interim last year, training camp, system adjustment, chance to work on things. Heart-to-hearts with a guy like Kevin Fiala, just finally making him understand what is needed from him, and then getting him to buy in to the point where Kevin Fiala also said, well, it's nice to know that my head coach has my back too. So there's a give and take there, and it's worked out very positively. So I think they've exceeded my expectations as far as the regular season. I agree with you, Eddie. I think going into this season, and we're at that point now, what happens in that first round is going to determine a lot. If it just ends up, unfortunately, like the past, then we're all going to be sitting around going, what's going on? But we saw some signs. You have some youngsters, Brant Clark, playing more of a everyday role with the Kings. He'll be tested in the playoffs because it'll be his first playoff. And, he's kind of that. He's really adjusted his game right now. He's really backed off. His risk reward is exactly where the Kings coaches want it. But he is the type of player, because of the skill that he has, he really ticks off opposition players. They don't like when they get, deked out of the play and he makes it. They don't like it. So just that skill level. But he'll be tested a lot. But the Kings are young. The stat we were using, or the graphic, the second youngest playoff team in the Western Conference. So all of those things you're looking, as far as those building blocks, that's what you're looking for now. And you're looking to build on that. You're looking to progress. You have some opportunities, like every team will, because the salary cap's going up next year and the following year, the projections. So you'll have some chances to add free agents, things of that sort. And if anything, Eddie, once you're in, you have a chance. Once you're in, you have a chance to go and win the whole thing. But that first round success would bode so well for the Kings. If they don't, say they could win first round and don't go any further, but that catches the attention of potential free agents around. Oh, this team, they're young, they're building, they're getting better. That would attract attention. So there's a lot of reasons to hope the Kings can win the first round this year. We talked about, we've talked a lot about it, because there are reasons to be optimistic, but to win that first round, I think, has a lot of other factors and byproducts that help in the future attracting other players.
Jim, one final question for you. I wanted to give you a chance to talk about your broadcast partner, Nick Nixon. We had him on the show recently. Great broadcaster, great guy. Kings fans have been very lucky to have him, obviously retiring at the end of the season, which we hope will last a lot longer. Get Nick maybe some radio calls going down the stretch there. But anything you would like to share about Nick Nixon?
Just total team player. in our industry, the media industry, we have personalities. Nick's kind of a calm personality. I've mentioned it. I've been asked these questions many times in the last month or so, but the one thing behind the scenes that I think Nick does very well, he's a great thinker. He comes up with, we bring up anything, any topic. He's a solution-oriented guy. He's trying to figure out solutions. If you're going to complain about something, find a solution. Nick doesn't complain about much, if anything, but he just has a process of thinking very smartly to get to an answer, to get to a reason to improve, to get to answer the question. He's a real smart thinker. And I think that's something that perhaps is behind the scenes that a lot of people don't see. But I mean, his call tells the story. It's about consistency. It's about describing the action. And it's about, for him, covering the excitement, but staying out of the way. He stays up. He doesn't make the game about himself. He makes the team the game. And I think that's very important.
Well, I know you would admit you've been very fortunate to work alongside some legends in Bob Miller and Nick Nixon. And frankly, we are very happy and fortunate to have you, Jim Fox, as well, doing Kings games. We appreciate you, all you've done for Kings fans, all your work. And we look forward to your call and Nick Nixon for the FanDuel Sports Network of the Kings Oilers series. And hopefully we'll get a chance to talk to you in a couple of weeks about a Kings matchup against the Golden Knights or the Wild. But thank you as always for doing this, and thank you for a great season this year.
Yeah, Eddie, my pleasure. Thanks very much. Always enjoy the chats, and you're right. I want to see Nick Nixon do some radio down the way here after this first playoff series.
Yeah, you and me both. Thank you, Jim. Really appreciate it, and enjoy the playoffs.
Thank you.
All right, for you everydayers, those who listen to watch Locked On LA Kings every day, coming up on Monday, we'll have one more breakdown of the Kings-Oilers series before Game 1 of the Stanley Cup playoffs is played. Exciting time for sure. Hope you will join us then. If you want to contact the show, you can send an email, lockedoneddie@gmail.com. You can always leave your comments if you're watching on YouTube in the comments section. Stay interactive with the show on social media, X, Twitter, Instagram, TikTok. We're at Locked On LA Kings. I'm Eddie Garcia. Thank you, as always, for listening and watching this episode of Locked On LA Kings, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Have a great rest of your day. We'll talk to you on our next show. And as always, go Kings, go.